Hey guys, this is Derrick, and welcome to episode 24 of my 30-day Facebook Live challenge. And tonight what I want to do is a little bit different. So last night I had my friend Devan join me. We did a Skype call, kind of a mini podcast thing. And I didn't realize till I rewatched it again last night after the episode was done, I didn't really do a great job giving him a full introduction. So tonight what I want to do is actually replay a podcast I did with Devan a couple months ago. And it gets much further into his history and his journey as a graphic designer and a web developer, and how he kind of came through from knowing essentially nothing to now working with clients like T-Mobile, and like you heard yesterday, he now works as a web developer for Moment Lenses based out of Seattle. So he definitely has some skills and some great insights, and I hope you can stick around and watch the whole thing. It's a little bit long, it's a little over an hour, so if you need to pause this and go get some popcorn and get nestled in, that's totally fine. I'll leave the replay up here, and then I'll post it again on my new YouTube channel so you can check it out later. But I hope you guys enjoy tonight's episode. All right, let's go ahead and play that replay. On this episode of the Rapid Workflow Design School, I've got my good friend Devan Flaherty on the line. He's a graphic designer, web developer, creative director. He's done lots of awesome work for clients like little mom and pop shop, all the way up to things like T-Mobile websites and stuff. So really excited to have him on the line today. We want to talk about freelancing and how he's landed some of those jobs, and just kind of his career and how he's gotten where he is. So Devan, welcome to the episode.
Hey, Derek. Thanks for having me, man.
Dude, thanks for joining the call. I really appreciate it. So yeah, really curious, like, how did you, I remember the first time I met you. I don't know if you remember this, but it was in Kevin Guido's office, and the movie Avatar had just come out, and you guys were photoshopping your faces into avatars. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yeah. I just came across that image the other day.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it was pretty great. I actually made my avatar for like all my like social and like internet profiles. It was a funny play on words.
You were pretty much like brand new at that point, weren't you? Like real green at everything, really, if I remember right.
Yeah, real green. I can't remember what year that was. I'm going to say that was probably like 2008, 2009. Yeah, I
think you're right. Yep.
I would have been doing design for about a year and a half at that point.
So you're nearly 10 years into your career, give or take.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So I think what's cool about that is in the 10 years, coming from where, like, literally you were like, I think you were sitting in this awful metal chair, like on this little side coffee table thing against the wall with your laptop.
Yeah.
So coming from that, kind of full circle, actually, because you did some really cool work as a creative director. We'll get into that, and moved to Washington, D.C. And was it Phoenix, you said? And then now you're kind of back working from home, kind of doing your own thing, and kind of come full circle on your career. So I'm really interested about, how you did that and just how that all came to be.
Yeah, definitely like a there and back again story in a lot of ways. Yeah, so I don't know if you want me to start from like the beginning of my design career and like kind of where I started fiddling with everything.
Yeah, definitely. I know a lot of our students are right in this position right now. They're just getting a taste for it, but how do they get to where they're, Mr. Devan Flaherty, like, awesome?
Yeah, well, I think the interesting thing is just kind of, I was thinking about my history and where I started. I remember being in 7th grade in a computer class, and our teacher came in and we were messing around with Microsoft Paint, and we had to do like a picture of ourselves. And so back then I had no idea what the crap I was doing, but I always loved messing around with Microsoft Paint. And my picture was like by far way better than everyone else's because I brought my image in and traced it, right? And I just knew how to use the program, and I guess I had a natural inclination in that direction, but I had no idea what graphic design was. So fast forward out of 7th grade to 4 years later, I start getting interested in design and Photoshop and Illustrator, and it just started out with just getting the trial programs. You remember when like Adobe would give you like 30 days to try this out? And so I would just download all the apps, try things out, just mess around, and just a lot of exploring. I was doing community college and high school at the same time, but I dropped out of my Photoshop class because it was like at 7:30 a.m. in the morning, and I was like, screw this. So it was like very interesting in the very beginning, like my relationship with design and the creative programs, because I didn't have an idea of how to actually use them in a useful way. So it was a lot of just exploring, a lot of just kind of figuring things out. It wasn't until I moved to Montana in 2007 to be a part of a church out here that, you know, they had a real heavy desire for design and being, you know, media driven. And it was just right on the cusp of when, you know, the non-denominational churches really started getting into design and getting good at it. And so I kind of got brought in, and it was like, hey, we need someone to make slides on the weekend. And that's kind of essentially how it really started, and how I really evolved into eventually becoming a designer. Was I was just meeting a weekly need, and I was just in the program weekly and solving those problems that would be thrown at me every step of the way. And, you know, I was with the church for, you know, I would say 3 years until I had, no, I think like 4 years before I had left. And, you know, if you look back at the church's design, if I ever were to do that, you'll see that the church design gets better, obviously, as I get better. And I think that just kind of comes part of it, and something you have to know about your career, where you're starting off. Like, you're going to be figuring out so much in the beginning. You're going to be exploring your designs. Like, if you, like, I'm sure, Derrick, you look back at old designs and you cringe.
Oh,
like,
I was just going to say, I cringe. Yeah. I'm like, oh, what was I thinking? I didn't turn the A and the T right. And it's all, oh, you know.
For sure. Like, some of the first like designs I remember doing was the church was in an old movie theater, and so we had these old movie posters out in the front, and so we utilized them for like kind of telling people about church on the weekend. And so I had made, you know, a poster that looked like Star Wars with like the floating heads. I had made a poster that I think had like the Departed feel to it. I did like all these like movie poster versions of like telling people about church, but I don't know, they just weren't good. Like, I thought they were great at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, I nailed this. And then looking back, it's like, oh my gosh. So I think, you know, that was something, just the understanding that you evolve, and I was evolving as I was learning new things and pushing myself forward and constantly learning. Like, I didn't really get an education for any of this, aside from Googling, you know, or like Lynda courses,
sure.
And tutorials, you know, which is exactly what, you know, you and your students are like going through. So it's great because that is my education. That is how I got here today, was just by going through tutorials. There's a new problem. Hey, we need to do this. We need to market this. We need a website. Okay, I don't know how to do any of that, but I'm going to go online and I'm going to figure it out because I need to solve this problem.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that's one characteristic of any good designer, developer, or I think really any human, but like, especially in this field, you got to continue to learn. You can't ever stop. The moment you stop, it's kind of like, I've heard it said, like being on an escalator, but going the wrong way. So like, imagine you're trying to go up the down escalator. Like, you don't just stop. Like, if you stop, you actually go backwards. You don't just like stop in time. Like, the world goes past you at a continual rate. So you have to continue to educate yourself and be involved with tutorials and learning more. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. Like, once you stop forward motion, you'll naturally just start to decline. Whether that's because the world's moving past you, or it's because you're kind of holding on to old things and not really motivating yourself to actually try anymore. Like, you'll decline. You gotta keep moving. You know, like, I remember talking to, you know, some of the older, you know, people in the design world. I'm sure you've come across them, but they've gone to get the degrees like years. I'm not saying like older, like, you know what I'm saying? And you talk to them and their design hasn't progressed. They haven't really been motivated to do anything. And who knows if that's because of burnout or whatnot. But what they hold on to was, well, I have this degree from this art school. And at the end of the day, your work is going to showcase itself. Like, that degree is going to help you land work. That degree is going to help you teach you fundamental things. And I think if you can and you're able to go do that, you definitely should. But that shouldn't be something that you lean on, for the rest of your life.
I find it interesting that the first project that my students get in this design school membership is we're working with their portfolio, because I got good grades in college. I went to a 4-year school. I'm still paying off that debt over 10 years later. And nobody has ever asked me, hey, what's your grades? What'd you do? They want to see my work. They want me to prove that I can do what I say I can do. And then I find it interesting, that podcast you just referred me to listen to, and I don't remember the moment, so I'll put it in a link here. But they talk about how their portfolio doesn't matter at all, because they had broken links and all kinds of stuff. And for them, it was word of mouth referrals. So I'm kind of curious, I don't know. I think, like, especially as a student starting off, you have to have some kind of a portfolio. You can't just be like, yeah, I can do that, and have like, well, have you ever done it before? No, I've got nothing to show. Like, that's not going to work. So I find it interesting, like you said, that they're leaning on their degree versus a portfolio. So how have you handled your portfolio, and how has that landed work for you, or has it?
Yeah, the answer is yes and no. And the reason because is you think, once you launch your portfolio, that, at least in my mind, once I get my site up there and I make it, search engine optimized, and it's going to look like the best, website for what I do here in the Valley. Obviously it's biased, but you put all your heart into this, and you want it to just look amazing, and you want to showcase your work. But the problem is, I've had 3 in the past 2 years. I've been doing freelance for full-time for 2 years now. And I've had 3 people contact me from the website, and I made no money from any of them.
I find that interesting. Okay, so here's something to think about, though. Like, I think I'm in the same boat. Honestly, I've had my portfolio up online for like 10 years. And I think... I know for sure one person has organically gone to the website, saw the portfolio, filled out the form, we did business, I made money. Like, one time. Everything else was word of mouth. Everything else was like, hey, check out Derrick's work. He's really good, or whatever. And so I find that interesting that on the flip side, though, most of the work I did, okay, so you get that word of mouth contact. But guess what? They still go to your website. So maybe the website wasn't the first lead that got the work, but it was kind of the closer that sealed the deal. At least that's been my experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you still need
that's
it.
The yes part. Yep. That's the yes part. Is it's not going to be the organic. People are just looking for web design in Kentucky. Like, very, very rarely is that going to be what leads to work. At least in my experience. And so, take that for what it is. But what you need is, and this day and age, if you're working for yourself, whether it's remotely, even if you have yourself an office, people want that online address. People need to visit your storefront, in a sense, via their phone. And so if someone hears from you from word of mouth, from a friend, from a neighbor, Facebook post, whatever it is, they have to have that first point of contact. And that first point of contact is your website and is your portfolio. And so that's why it's a yes, because it is the closer. And a lot of times, hey, check out this guy's work. He's really good. They go to your website, they finally check your portfolio, and then they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, I guess this is good work. And then they're willing to call you and take that next step forward.
So how did you build your portfolio? What are you using?
Yeah, so I'm using a static site generator called Jekyll, and it comes with like a templating language. I don't really need to get into the super nerdy details of it, but basically I get to create dynamic content off my computer, so I can create my work posts, and if I wanted to, I could do blogs, and it all lives within files and directories on my computer rather than a database. And then I basically push it up online, and it builds itself. and then I have all these static pages. So I'm not doing any server requests for database pulls or anything like that. So it's really fast. And for me, another thing you'll learn, and I think this is really, really important, spending all this time on making sure that you have this amazing and custom website. That's really cool if you have the time to do that and if you want to learn and explore. And I spent way too much time on my website when really the designers I follow and that I think are successful, a lot of times their website is like a picture and then links to their Dribble portfolio, their Behance, in their social networks. Because people want to see what you're doing now. People want to see your work in progress. People want to know what you're working on. They don't really care about your fancy animations or how, you did this one thing uniquely or different, because nothing is really unique or different. And really at that point, you're really just designing your website for yourself or for other creative agencies to kind of compete against them. But when it comes to the actual client, they just want to see your work.
That's so true.
However you could do that, just do it.
I'm glad you said that, because that's literally exactly what I just taught in one of the actual lectures. So I'm glad you agree that I'm not like off the wall. But I think that's important. When I was in school, design school, like we had to make a physical portfolio. And at the time it was this crappy plastic container, and I thought it was all cool. It wasn't. It was terrible. And again, that's that hindsight talking. But I think the problem you run into is if you spend too much time, especially I don't know, because as a print designer, you have to show physical work. I think,
right.
They want to see that tangible, you've done something. As a web developer or somebody who's playing in the online space, mobile apps, whatever, it all lives in ones and zeros and digital pixels, right? So there is that balance between like, do you need a physical book or do you need something digital? I really am seeing the trend moving away. Like you said, it's just a landing page and they're linking out to Behance or Dribble or Instagram or something. And I think what I appreciate about that is it keeps you current versus having something that goes dated. And I think you hit it just perfect, saying they want to see what you're working on now. What are your skills like today? Not where are they 10 years ago? Like, where are you at? So I think that's just such a huge point. So I'm curious.
Which I find is a point.
Oh, go ahead.
You're good.
No,
you're good. I was saying I find it as a point of contention for myself because, I read this tweet. It was, when you're hustling, you don't have time to talk about what it takes to hustle. Like when you're hustling, you're not like on Twitter, you're not like blogging, like, here's how to hustle, what you like always read, or like you're always surrounded by. It's like, if you're really working your tail off, you don't have time, to necessarily, be doing these things. And so you really have to make it a priority. And I definitely don't make it a priority enough to be making sure my Dribble's up to date or my website's up to date. I really just get lost in I need the billable hours. So I'm just working on the work, but that's something I need to get better at.
Well, I think it's an interesting position to be in, because when you're starting out, you don't have anything, you don't have any work, nobody's knocking on the door. So you spend a lot more time trying to get noticed. And then you get to this tipping point where you're so busy, your stuff gets so dated, and it's this magical moment where nobody cares about your portfolio anymore because they just know like you're unobtainable. Oh, he's 3 weeks out. Oh, he's a month out. Like, he must be really good. And they don't even, I don't know. I don't know if you've experienced that or not, but my portfolio, I feel like, is painfully dated too. There's still some solid stuff. I'm still landing work, but some of my greatest stuff, nobody knows exists yet. Cause it's just, I don't know. I haven't updated it yet. I haven't been able to, I've been busy,
Yeah. And as designers, showcasing your work and wanting to make sure it looks good and it is presentable is what really I struggle with, because I don't want to just like slap a picture of it. I want to put it together and show it off well, or write about it. Why is this good? You know? And so that's really, and that is just a part of who I am as a person too. Like, I don't want to put like pictures on the wall in my house unless they're the right frame and the right picture. So I have a lot of barren walls in my house because I just haven't taken the time to make sure this one area looks good and is the way I want it to.
Sure.
So yeah, that's a fault of myself.
I'm the same way. I wouldn't get anything done if it wasn't for my wife, who just kind of like throws nails in the wall and hangs everything up. So it's a good balance. There's a lot of things that she just does, and I appreciate it. And then I'd be like, I'll spend months agonizing over it and get nothing done. It's just our personalities. I think it's why we're good at what we do. We really pay attention to the details. But I think at the end of the day, you need a timeline or a budget or a client kind of cracking the whip to keep us in, in line. So one thing I'm curious about, so going back to that portfolio, so you've worked at the church, you've done some creative agency stuff. You're currently, you have your own agency you're operating right now. And I'm curious, that creative director role that you landed was in DC. Was it creative director at that point, or was it just kind of developer? What was your role?
Yeah, it was. I think the title was senior designer. Yeah, I think it was a senior designer position.
What I'm curious, how did you get that contact, especially multiple states away? How did you get your foot in the door? Was your portfolio part of that? Like, what would you say was key to you actually landing that position and getting that job?
Okay, so yeah, this is great because it's kind of a funny story. So I decided to move to DC because my family was out there. And so we had, I quit my job at the church and was getting ready to move out there. So, had my portfolio up and all the time while I was working at the church and having a full-time gig, I was always doing like some freelance stuff on the side. So I had my own website up, and I would kind of update it, and I had my own blog, and I would do some design tutorials and stuff. So I was leaving, and I had my website, and I think I applied through the job through Monster, or it was on some job board. And I went out there without anything. And I was like, I'm going to figure it out. Something's going to happen. And
That's
it was
crazy.
really like arrogant. It's really arrogant. I'm looking back on it now. But I had got contacted by this agency. It was called ACS, Affordable Creative Services.
Oh.
And yep. And so
no.
I got contacted, and I went in for the interview. And it's DC. So the thing about DC is it's not like a cool city. It's like politics and military and government, and I mean there's cool parts of it, but generally, so I go in this like stodgy building and into this office space, and then I walk into the conference room, and I'm not just like met by the creative director, like the whole team comes in, and my website's up on the TV. And and they're like asking me questions, and they start drilling me. So they're like, "This website, you did it yourself?" Yes, I did. Okay. And you're not using a theme or anything? No, I'm not using a theme or anything. It's my own custom WordPress theme. Okay. And you've done all this work, like you didn't. I'm like, yes, like this is all my, like they couldn't believe, I'm not lying to you. They had a hard time believing that a guy 4 years, not, formally trained, had this website and had this work. And it was just really interesting because I was really confused, like in the interview process, why this was happening. But later to find out one of my good friends who I was working with there, who became one of my good friends, he was like, I just didn't believe that was your work. Like, I thought you were using someone's theme and you're just ripping someone off. And so for sure at that point, I mean, that's an essence and a way of the portfolio really helping me land a job. But so, yeah, I was kind of just brought on as like a production designer at the time. And we had this furniture company called Court, and it was email newsletters. And I did that for like the first week, and I was like, oh no, what did I get myself into? But I had experience in web, and they had a lot of web clients. And so all of a sudden I was helping these other designers kind of solve these web problems. And like, no joke, 3 weeks later, I moved into this senior designer position, and I'm managing all my own clients. And I'm like the web go-to guy there. And, I like almost, people started kind of getting mad. Like there's this one girl who worked there who's actually frustrated because I started taking some of her clients, not on purpose. I wasn't like, I want your clients, but the creative director just started handing me these jobs that she wanted. And so it kind of created some animosity. I'm like, I'm just working hard and trying to do my thing. I'm sorry that this is not working out for you right now. But so, yeah, it was an interesting thing of me just taking a step out there and having the work and having the portfolio and trying to be as much of a people person. In the design industry, you got to be about people. You can't just like clam up because all you do is talk to people.
Yeah.
So
I think so. There's two things I want to talk about with that. Yeah. Communication is one of the biggest things. We'll circle back to that. The other is the opportunities. I think, that I've talked to a lot of people like, well, there's no work, or there's, things are drying up, or man, everybody can just do it themselves because they can subscribe to Adobe and it's so cheap now and everybody's a designer. But that's not true. Like, I think when you become best in the world or really good at your craft, the world notices and makes space for you. So I think for you, one thing that I noticed and that I admired, like, again, like I'm not like that girl in the story, but like, I worked my tail off to learn a lot of things. And then like, here you are like just cruising through. And part of that was your like insatiable desire to just learn everything. And so you were always like reading tutorials, studying different blog posts, like studying different technologies. Like you were just in the midst of all of that. So then when there's like, oh, we have this problem, you were just like, oh, I just read about this, like do this, this, and this. And so I think that's something to pay attention as a student, is that you're always a student. You're never going to be there. You're never going to arrive. Like you're gonna have to continue learning. And I think that's why those opportunities came for you, because yeah, you were really good, but you were also really knowledgeable on a whole breadth of topics. And I think that's really important today to be successful. Not just like, oh, I'm really good at Photoshop. You have to be a little bit of everything, like a Renaissance kind of a player, right?
Yeah, it definitely in the freelance world, you kind of have to know a little bit of everything. If your client wants you to do something, your options are either say you can't do it, hand it off to someone else, or become awesome at whatever the request is, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things is kind of anticipating what that is. For an example, like you said, like I am an aggressive learner. Like that is something like those two words, aggressive learner, are two things I've always kind of noted about myself. And you have to take advantage of like any chance you get because of how fast everything moves. So I literally was thinking about this last night, because hanging out with my fiance right now, what that kind of looks like is her putting on a movie, falling asleep, and then me on my phone reading about whatever the new web technology is or whatever I'm working in, but how I can be better, how to use certain tools in certain instances. That's just me sitting on the phone, up until 2 a.m. just getting on Stack Overflow and asking questions and looking around. And
that's just like me.
Really
I do the same thing. Our hangs look the same. Right? Yeah. Like to my wife's like, having a good time? I'm like, actually, yeah, I am. Like, I forgot you were here. Like, sorry, my bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and that's, I think, what it really looks like. And I think with, sometimes you could say, well, you need to be learning and all this stuff all the time. It doesn't mean you're always in some sort of class. It doesn't mean that you're always, going through, 4 different tutorial things at a time. But it really is, I think, I'm trying to get the right words here. It's a train of thought. It's a way of life where you're not going to let yourself not knowing something stop you. And you have to push through it. And, how good does it feel, Derrick, when you're working on something and you've been working on it for 4 hours and it should work, but for some reason it's not. This could be a design, this could be, a website, but you're working on something and you just can't get it until you finally, whether you go seek the inspiration, whether you follow a tutorial or, you're just reading, forums online, like when you finally get it, like that elation is of its own kind, right? Like nothing feels as good as that, at least to me.
I know for me, like when I get stuck, I've learned, it took a long time to learn this, because I used to just sit down and like hammer it out until I figured it out, and it would take way longer than it needed to. And I study a lot of like success and personal development and time management stuff. And one thing that they all say is like, step away, go do something like I don't know, go do something athletic or go for a run or go mow your lawn or do something that doesn't require brain power. And then your brain will kind of lighten up and start working on the problem on its own. And then you can have that solution, which actually has led me to, shifting gears a little bit, to a more of a value-based billing when I go work with clients, because how do you bill for that time when you're running around on the soccer field or going for a run or doing, I don't know, going for a swim or doing something else, and all of a sudden then you have that gold idea for a client? Like, do you charge them for that? Like, how do you do that? And that was one shift that we made with our agency, was going from, I'm going to bill you, X amount per hour to solve your problem. And guess what? As I get faster, you make less money. And so we shifted to like more of a per project billing cycle.
Yeah. So, there really are pros and cons to how you handle money, obviously. And I think what you have to do is really start off with what you're comfortable with when it deals with clients and talking to people. First and foremost, just get into a rhythm of being comfortable of talking about money and being able to know your worth. I think really, no matter what you do, whether you're charging hourly or you're doing value-based, the first thing to know is just know your worth. Don't charge less than what you believe your value to be.
I think that's a tough one, though, because I think self-consciously, even myself, I remember having like forever long conversations with my mother-in-law, because they owned a business, and we were trying to talk about like, well, what should I charge? What's its worth? And, for me, even though I was told you're worth a lot, I was like, I don't know, like it just seems easy for me. So how do you... I remember almost losing work because I wasn't charging enough, and they didn't take me serious. And then as soon as I started charging more and more money, like the work like nobody batted an eye. They just thought I was better, and so they wanted me even more. And then I had to raise my prices even more to not get too big. I don't know. It was just kind of interesting. Yeah,
what I'm really saying in regards to that is, for sure, it's just like not working for free, and because, like you said, like it is easy for you, and a lot of times clients will be like, "Hey, can you just do this bug fix for me, or can you just change this real quick?" And so the big thing I really believe in is, if you are taking time away from your family, if you're taking any time away from hanging out with your friends or your plans, or you're answering an email on your phone, like you have to account for that. And you need to like know your value and the value of your time. And so I don't think, because I think you're right. When you are starting off, it's really hard to know what that number is. And so, talking, and if someone is hearing this and saying, you need to know your value, I'm sure that could be confusing. And so what I really am just trying to communicate is just know what your time is worth, and have some monetary figure to that, outside of like your hourly work or value-based or whatever. But just like know, like if you're working, and just get that through your mind. Just because you love it, just because it's design, or just because it's web development, like you got to charge for it. That's business, just because it's easy doesn't mean it's not business. That just means you're in a good business,
Yeah. I thought, like I wanted to give away this whole thing that we're doing with these students for free. Hey students, I was going to give this to you for free. But the reason why I didn't is everything that I've done for free, I didn't value as much, and I ended up not finishing. As soon as you start having some money, some skin in the game, like you kind of take it serious. And so as a client, same thing up goes. If they know they're paying you a substantial amount of money, they'll get back to you. They will get you the content you need. When it's a friend or family member, like something always happens. Like whether it's, we had a funeral or a wedding, or we were traveling, or something happened, like it just isn't a priority. And then you get strung along, and then you're in this like never ending vicious cycle.
Well, like you and me talked about this a while ago. We were just saying how work doesn't start until you get a deposit.
Exactly.
And and the first reason, in my mind, is one, because I don't want to start work until I know you're 100% in the game. Like until you're ready to give me the content and your skin's in the game and you're ready to actually have me start on this project. Because I don't want to be starting on a project and then 2 weeks go by and me just be waiting, which happens no matter what. But until people actually have their money in your hands, I've realized that's not until they're actually ready, and like, okay, let's move forward on this.
Yeah.
The other thing is, don't start working on it, because if they decide they don't want to do it, well, then you're just doing work for nothing, right? And then,
I'm curious. Keep going.
No, I was going to say, like, the third thing for me of just getting that deposit is, oh gosh, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You're going to have to cut this. No, you're good.
What I was thinking about when I was going to cut you off was like, we're kind of talking like where you're at now, but a lot of my students have never been paid for their work yet. So, or maybe they've finished like their very first or second job. So how do you remember your first freelance job? Like how you landed that and how you convinced somebody to pay you to design and like, how'd that go?
Yeah. So my first freelance job, I believe was a logo. And I think I might have done it for like $100.
I feel like the logo is like the rite of passage. That or a business card. It really is.
Yeah, for sure. It is the rite of passage because an uncle's friend's cousin who needs a logo for their business, and that is really the rite of passage. It's true. So I think that kind of happened where someone knew I was doing design. I think it was someone involved in the church, and they just said, "Hey, I'll give you $100 to do this logo," and that was like, "Oh, someone will pay me to do a design? What?" Like, okay, and it didn't matter how many hours you put into it. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And
then you realize you made like 50 cents an hour.
Yes, exactly. And it was terrible. And you go back on it and you're not meeting their needs, and you're like, well, you should pay me more, but you don't really feel like you have the right to say that because you're just was handed this job. Right.
Yeah. I'm curious. What do you? Oh, sorry. Dang it! I keep cutting you off. I just get so excited.
No, you're good.
I'm curious. If you were to do a logo today, what would you charge?
I would do nothing under $1,500.
Good man. That's where I started too.
Yeah, and the reason for that is, gosh, this goes back to the whole hourly thing, right? We could probably do a logo, especially if like we understand the brand and their messaging up front and a little bit of discovery phase. We could probably do a logo pretty cheap. Like I don't know exact numbers, but if we were to like have our hourly idea in our mind, we could do it probably way less than $1,500.
Oh yeah. I mean, if you knock out of the park, you could do it in maybe 3 hours. But the problem is you have, and that's what the client thinks too, because like, well, it's just a simple mark. It's just like literally the circle with like a swoosh and some text. Like that's what they think, but it's really the discovery phase where you're making sure you're not ripping off somebody else's look, and you're trying to figure out all the brand that goes around this simple mark. And that's what
creating
they don't get.
Something timeless, not just trendy.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's where the value comes in. It's a value. It's not just a like, well, yeah, I can spit out a design and make it all vectorized and let's print it. But like, there's so much more. And that's what you have to educate your client. Like it's so much more than just, a shape on a piece of paper.
Yeah. Well, if a client needs a logo, and this is a great example, if a client needs a logo, right? And this, I think, will help communicate hourly versus value. They need something to communicate their brand, communicate their messaging. And that logo is going to be on, let's say, all their products. And it's going to be something that, potentially thousands of people are going to recognize and are going to associate with their business and are going to associate good things with their business, and is going to be on any of their material. That one logo, right? That now has been an established part of their entire, let's say, $1,000, $2,000, $20,000, $1 million business, and you do it for $300, like you're really undercutting yourself, like hugely, because it's worth more than that. Like the value of that logo for that company and what it means to them is worth way more than that price.
And let's explain why it's worth more. You're solving a problem. How much is that problem solved worth to you? It's their flagship. Like design can elevate. So you and I, and the designers listening, like you can literally create anything you can imagine. Like I always think of that. Like I compare when it was just my wife and I, like I look at these huge agencies making stuff and be like, well, I can make that exact same thing. I've got the same tools they do. Like, so why shouldn't I make the same money they do? And on top of that, I could charge a little less because there's not all the middlemen, the project managers and everybody else in between. But like, why not? Why not you? Why can't you solve that problem? And what's that worth to a business? A business person is thinking in dollars and cents. Can I pay you $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 to solve this problem that's going to make me $100,000? Well, then yeah, I'll spend $20,000 to make $100,000. Yep. So why would you charge $300? You know,
you wouldn't go if you were running a dealership for Lamborghini and someone comes on your lot. So someone comes on your Lamborghini lot and is looking for a car. And then they say, hey, I really am looking for a car. I want this horsepower. I want the luxury seats. I want the amazing sound system. And I need it to be in the $2,000 range. You would not, like, you wouldn't really negotiate with that. You'd be like, you're on my lot looking for a Lamborghini. Like, you know what type of vehicles I provide. So maybe your budget reflects more of like that used car dealer down there. And I'm not like comparing designers, but what I'm really trying to say is expectations of the client and the monetary value of what they're getting, you have to help educate them. And so you have to bring them to the car and say, you see these lines? These were designed by a team of Italian designers. And, it was handcrafted over years. And this leather is made by a farmer in, like whatever. Like you walk them through the car and you show them why it's worth every penny.
I find it interesting that you went into the car because that's what, so our brand was Mitchell's Garage, actually in honor of my grandfather, but like creative media chop shop. The whole thought was like, I don't know. That's a whole nother topic, but we would use a similar approach with our clients. I found that if you give them a low, medium, and high, they don't choose based on price. They choose based on an emotional response to that. So, and Apple does the same thing with their pricing. So they'll pick, I need something cheap. So they'll pick the cheapest one, or I need something safe that everybody does. And so they'll pick the middle one, or like, I only want the best. So they pick the most expensive option we give them. And we kind of relate that, like, do you need like a good Chevy or Ford or a Cadillac, or, do you need like a Vespa? And we kind of put it in that terms, and then they get it. They're like, oh, I just want a good Chevy, and so then that kind of dictates their price point, and so we kind of try and remove most people make decisions based on emotions, whether they like it or not.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things I've learned is communicating to them, like, it's okay to do the easier and cheaper thing. Like, if that's what your business needs, so I do a lot of work on websites. That is probably 90% of my work. And there are tools like Squarespace, which I can create a website for someone and make it look decent, like in a day or less. Okay. And let's say that website is helping them push products and sell things. So, do I charge them $1,000? Do I charge them by the time? Do I charge them $5,000 because they're going to be making $100,000 off of that website? That kind of goes back to that question. But the thing is like that, no matter what, that Squarespace site is going to be cheaper than the custom built Ruby on Rails with a Vue.js front end that I could build them. It's just because the design, the development, the discovery, the data structure, the back end, like all that's pretty much stripped out because Squarespace provides so much of that.
But yes and no, because you're still solving their problem. So if at the bottom line is that same problem is still solved, why shouldn't you charge just as much for the Squarespace site? Yeah, they could do it themselves. And if they say that, I'd be like, okay, go ahead, and not mean about it. A lot of times I'll be like, if your budget changes, like let's just say that they, you throw the quote out there and they're like, thanks, but no thanks. But like, okay, no problem. Like, I don't have to be a charity, and I don't mean that bad. There are charity jobs I do take on because I'm passionate about it or whatever. But like when it comes to business, it's a business expense for them. So if it's not in their budget, it's not you're a bad person or emotionally like you're being a bad person for not doing it. Like, no, like there will be somebody else who values your time, values your work, and will pay you to do that. So for me, and you're kind of fresh off the heels of this. So you've had a client recently that kind of balked at some stuff you did, and still maybe a little raw, a little fresh. But I think it's one thing I've appreciated about you is your worth, and when it gets to where somebody doesn't, like, how do you gracefully kind of tap out and say thanks, but this isn't a good fit?
Well, yeah, I think the big thing for me is, okay, first you should try to approach any situation with humility. Just like recognize you're not the best human being, that you probably made mistakes. You're not the best probably designer or developer. And just approach the situation with humility, no matter what. And I think that just should be a part of just human nature in general. But if a client if you're not meeting eye to eye on a client, if whatever the project's not working out, or if before the even project you're not able to land on a budget, I really do try to make things work. I really do try to make things work because I would like to take their money. I would love to take their money. And I would love to have another person who can speak well about my business. And I would love to have that lead to more people who speak well about my business. So I want to make things work. And so that's kind of what I was saying with, the Squarespace versus the big custom site is really, if you're a mom and pop shop and you're some agro company, sometimes just doing a Squarespace site is really all you need. And I don't need to upsell them to give them something they don't need. So, hey, here's the value of a website for what you're doing. I'm going to, make it way quicker than the value of it is, but here you go. And this is what I can do for you. So you're still making money off of it, but you can still push them in another direction. And then, like you said, you have like your Cadillac where you can say, I'm going to do this more custom site, and, it's going to take a lot more time and experience. And you can kind of upsell people to that if they really need it. But if you really can't make it work, if after trying to go with your dream route, and they still can't agree that the Chevy is going to work for them for that price point, or if you just realize, okay, so Derrick, last year you had handed me a few clients when I just started doing freelance. And it was some German company. I
was just going to bring that up. I remember my wife was in the hospital having a baby, and we had this crazy deadline for this website. The company was based out of New York and Chicago, I think, and they were a German accelerator startup thing, mainly based out of Germany. But that's a whole nother topic. I remember you and I pulling this long overnighter. You worked, you didn't even go to bed. You stayed at the office, our downtown office, and push through, and you were like the hero. It was amazing. I remember that now.
Yeah. So, but there was, that was great. That was awesome. No,
it wasn't. That was terrible. That was bad planning and poor budgeting and waiting to the last minute. But yeah, we did great. We finished it.
So when I last year, I just kind of started freelance and yeah, we did that. But you had handed me the German accelerator. They needed a PowerPoint.
Oh, I remember that.
Another lady you handed needed some banner. Okay, so this is really simple stuff, like PowerPoint and banner. Now there's some they're three big no's when it comes to freelancing that I've always lived with, but in desperate times I felt like maybe I could fudge on them. One of the big no's is don't work until you get paid. Another one of the big no's is don't audition for work. And the third big no is if you don't like the person, don't work for them. It's pretty basic stuff. And so I pretty much broke all three of those rules within the first 2 months of me going freelance. And I had to re-educate myself why those rules were there. I remember these.
I'm a terrible friend. I knew this, and I was like, here, let me refer I should, and I think for me, it was I already had identified all those issues for myself, and I was like, hell no. And so but being the quote good guy, I was like, well, let me refer you to some other people. And I should have cued you in on that. I'm sorry. I'm a terrible friend.
I think back then even if you would have cued me in, I was so just desperate for making my freelance thing work and not going and getting a job at Costco.
I remember that. Yeah.
I was willing to take it. So, one of the example, the German accelerator company, I was an audition for work. Hey, we have these PowerPoints. Can you show us what you could do? I'm like, well, I don't audition for work. And they're like, well, we're not going to hire you unless we can see that you can do this. And I'm like, gosh, I really need the money. I could knock this out of the park. So I'm like, okay. I knock out 3 slides. I send it to them, and I'm like, here's what I'm looking at. And they're like, okay. And I had mentioned price to them before, but then they're like, so we would like you to do this for this much. And I was like, nope, can't do it for that amount of money. I think it was like $200 for 20 slides. Something ridiculously small. And I was like, I could do it for $2,000, And they're like, no, can't do it. And I was like, all right, well, you can't use any of my work. Sayonara. And I was pretty bitter about it, that I auditioned for work and didn't land it. Even though they liked my work.
You know what? I had to do the same thing, but I actually landed the job. What's that say? No, I'm just kidding. No, but we're obviously both young and inexperienced, because I did the same thing. That we designed like a full website mock-up. We luckily won the job. But it was, that was early learning, I think, for both of us.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one was this lady, she wanted a banner, and it was for this like event, and it was it just was, what she wanted was just terrible. And I did everything that she wanted. I didn't get paid yet. I didn't get a deposit, but I did everything she wanted. I did not enjoy working for her, but I humbled myself, and I took all of her feedback, and I just tried to make myself the best person. And still, at the end of the day, I was going to email her and say, hey, I don't think this is working out, but she beat me to the punch. And she was like, I don't think this is working out. And I was like, all right, well, you still need to pay me for my time, because I have that in my contract, but she never did. And I'm not going to squabble over, I'm not going to squabble over, $200. So anyways, big mistakes I made, which you should not make no matter how desperate you are.
I remember, and they can start off good and then turn into psycho clients. And I think that's something I struggle with, because I'm very much a see it through to the end kind of person. And that was some of my darker days, actually, on some of those, the German project, and then the other one that I hand off to you. Both of those are ironic, that we both went through that, because I just felt worthless and was stressing about it and not hitting the mark. And that's usually you and I both, like when we design something, clients are like, oh, I love it. Great job. First round, which isn't always the case, but like usually and that comes back to, this is one of the key points I wanted to get back to, was communication and just understanding what the needs are for the project. And I think when you let the client start to drive, they aren't usually artists. Usually they're business people, and they think they know what they want. And then when you give them exactly what they said they want, they're like, oh, I don't like it. Well, yeah, you didn't like it. You didn't go to school for this. You don't understand the problems that I'm solving. Like, yeah, you needed to solve this business problem, but there's a whole other host of issues that you've hired me to be an expert. And so I'm looking out for you. So just pay me, I'll solve your problem, and just run with it. And I think so many times clients like, well, my wife's favorite color is purple, so it has to be purple, or whatever. Like, they have silly reasons for why they want something to be something. It's like, okay, as your pixel pusher, like, you've hired me. Yes, I will humble myself. I'll do this. I'll churn out the work for you. But if you want me to put my expert hat on, here's how I think this should go, And so there's this fine line between like doing the work, getting paid, don't piss off the client, and pushing them back a little bit, like knowing when, because so this all comes back to communication. I think so many times the clients or the projects that have failed have been when the communication wasn't clear, or you weren't talking the same language. So usually that's like, your definition of what modern is way different than what modern is to them, or grungy, or whatever, I feel like most projects and clients derail because of communication. So how do you communicate with your clients?
Yeah, it's really good. I think, keyword is expectation. And so I have this client right now I'm working with. They're they're a creative agency themselves, and they're based in California, and so they need a splash site until they get their actual agency site up, and they also do like a film agency, so they have like a sister site they want to get up to, and then they want to hand all this other work to me. So we're just kind of starting this relationship, and we probably had 10 phone calls before I actually started work. And that's partially on his end, and he's a very vocal person, and anytime he'd have like a good meeting that could lead to potential web work, he would call me. But we really would try to hash things out, and every conversation would end with me saying, I need to know your expectations. Like, I need to know what you're looking to get from this relationship, and what your expectations are for me. Because, Derrick, we're designers, we're developers, but we're so much more. Like, we could help someone with their marketing, like their messaging. We could pitch them what they could make a short film about that could help push their product. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what we do. Like, the biggest problem we solve is messaging and communicating their problem, their need, their desire, what they're trying to say. We just happen to get hired to do that through a graphical form. But we could do that, on a grander campaign scale. And a lot of times we do. Figuring out exactly what the client wants from you, though, is, I think, the most crucial step in the beginning. Yeah. So if a client wants to hire me to be a web developer and they want to provide me the designs and just develop the site, that's fine. I'll push back and I'll say, hey, this design's not working well here. This is going to take a lot longer, and I'll communicate how the design could be better and how, we could make it faster and quicker and what things we could do. Like, I'll do my job as a developer, but if that's what I'm hired for, like, that's what I'm going to be. And I think a lot of times, so, this person that you kind of brought up that I had an issue with earlier, is their expectation for me was like this expectation of an employee. And I'll explain the difference here is, as an employee, you work for them and you are theirs. And if they need you to do something, it doesn't matter really how that changes, or how your responsibilities change, because you're working for them and just getting paid at that price. If someone wants me to develop a website, but then all of a sudden they want me to be the designer for the website, but then all of a sudden I'm supposed to be the creative director and have to just come up with the messaging and vision, if that's not communicated from the get-go, I'm not just going to naturally move into those things. And I shouldn't naturally move into those things, because I'm not trying to move up in a position, I'm not trying to be that for their company. I'm trying to solve their problem. And if I'm not getting paid to solve the problem of designing the website now, and if I'm not getting paid to solve the problem of creating the messaging, well, there's a big problem there.
Right. And I think that's communication along the way. Just, this isn't working, before it really derails and things go bad.
Yep. And so I think expectations, figure out what they want from you, figure out how you can help them, and don't make it about you in the beginning, but just like, hey, you're running this business. You guys are selling concrete, countertops, and you guys are like doing amazing. How can I come alongside you and partner with you and make you guys more successful? And what is your expectation of me as a designer, as a developer, as someone who's developing your brand? Figuring that out, getting on the same vernacular, like you said. When I say clean, this is what I think of. When you say clean, you think of Mr. Clean. Okay, let's fix that,
I'll go so far as like take screenshots of other websites, and I'll define, okay, to me, this is modern, or this is clean. This is kind of the direction I'm thinking. Is this what you think? If not, here are some websites, and I'll show them like Behance or, other stuff. Say, if you could maybe pull like 4 or 5 that you think would work well for you, that would help us kind of meet in the middle. And that usually goes a long way in making sure that, at least from a design perspective and from a scope of work perspective, we're speaking the same language.
Yeah. How often, a question for you, Derek, is how often have you worked for a client, let's say a website, and they send you something and they say, hey, I'm really inspired by this. I like this. And then you go, okay, you take that inspiration and then you do your own spin on it and you solve the problem in a way that you think is amazing. And then they come back to you and say, no, I said I wanted it to look just like this.
I think it was the same client that I passed off to you. Usually
Really?
that works really well. Yeah. But yeah, it was like, I used the colors you wanted. I did everything you wanted. And like, what was the deal? And like, it was just not clicking. And so it was so bad. It got to where we were FaceTiming or screen sharing. I don't remember how we did it, but like, cause she was based out of New York and we are in Montana. So obviously forever away. Literally spent a couple hours where I was basically her design monkey. Like, put this over here, push this over here. Nope. Change the color. Like literally it was, I had to just step away because I wanted to get paid. We were invested enough that I couldn't just walk away. We were like at the finish line. So I had to bow down to some pretty ridiculous requests to get that like done. It was insane. And it actually, even doing that, I still fired her. That was my first client I ever fired. And I remember it vividly because I'd never had to do that before. I was like, you know what? Like I literally was at my breaking point and I was like, I'm done. And she was like, what? I was like, we're done. I can't do this anymore. I've done everything you've asked. I'll even take, I don't even remember if I offered her a discount or not, but I was like, I was nice about it, but I was very direct, very firm with kindness. Like, this is not working. Please find somebody else. And so she was kind of taken back because I don't think she'd ever been told no before. Yeah. And so it was interesting because then a couple hours later I get a call and it was like an alien abduction, total night and day, 180 shift. And apparently she's friends with somebody at Google, and the guys at Google had looked at my site and they're like, I'm name dropping here, but no, they were like, They looked at it because she was like, this is a piece of crap. He didn't do this. And they're like, well, actually, no, this is really good stuff. Like, he did this and this, and it looks like you've only got maybe half an hour left to do this. And, she told me this. So she had called me back and she's like, I am so sorry. I had no idea. They told me what it takes and they educated me with this and this and this. And she's like, would you please consider finishing this? And, I wish I could remember the end of the story. I feel like I did. I feel like I was like, okay, let's do this. And then she was eternally grateful. I do remember that. She was like, from then on forward, like, just thought I was the greatest human on earth. And I found it interesting because I stood up to her and told her no, which was against everything that I've ever done prior. And it was the hardest thing I ever did, but it was the most rewarding thing I ever did because I had this sense of like, I am worth this much. I know I can do this. And it changed everything for me. It kind of put my clients on notice. Like, look, I am here to serve you and your business. But at the end of the day, like, I am an expert. And if you can't work with me and trust my judgment, then find somebody else and good luck. And I mean that. Good luck, but I'm not your guy. So I want to wrap this up. I really, really appreciate your time. And I know you and I could geek out over this for an entire day, but I want to wrap this up. So I'm curious what you're working on now, where you're headed next, and just if you have any other parting thoughts for the students as they dive into this career of graphic design and the creative arts.
Yeah. So right now I'm actually like been busier than I've ever been, which has been great. Doing work for T-Mobile's like business unit. And so that's been fun. I built a website for them using some newer web technologies that allows their salespeople request artwork from their creative agencies that they have on tap. So that was a fun little project. It's not like really a public website, but it was really cool to be a part of and to be working with T-Mobile and be working on some flyers and to add that to my portfolio. I've been working for a Seattle-based company called Moment Lenses. So they make these really awesome camera lenses for your iPhones or Androids or Pixels, and that really allow them to have like a DSLR quality, or you can get like a fisheye lens. And so I've been working for them on some website stuff for their website. At the same time, different creative agencies, a few church websites. I did Airbnb type project for horse stables a few months ago, and so I'm doing some revisions for that. Taking that to the next phase. So I have a lot of things going on right now. So work is good. Like there's provision, there is happiness, that there's money. But the thing you should really understand about freelance and working for yourself is, yes, I can wake up at 10 if I wanted to. And yes, I could go for a walk or go get a coffee or really manage my schedule however I want. But at the end of the day, I'm responsible for everything. I'm responsible for getting my clients. I'm responsible for making them happy. I'm responsible for delivering on time. It all falls on me. Like there is no boss, there is no employee, there is no one else I could really hand things off to or have me assist, unless like I'm contracting someone else out. And so there's times where I'm working till 4 a.m. I work till 3 a.m. 2 times this week to try to meet deadlines. And that's just because they came to me saying, I need this done in 2 weeks. Well, I had a bunch of other work going on too. And so I wanted to make it happen. I wanted to make the client happy. And so that was a sacrifice I was willing to take because I knew that it would lead to more work. So you have to really know yourself, what you're willing to do, what you're willing to sacrifice. And yes, you're self-employed. You can manage your schedule, but you also gotta do whatever it takes to get the job done. So just a note, something to put in your pocket if you're looking to go on the freelance route. But yeah, just keep learning, keep being aggressive. Don't stop and find out what you really love to do. And if you can become an expert in that, then do it. But be familiar with everything else too. Me and Derrick, we had a buddy who will probably be on the show at some point, maybe not.
I'm sure I'm hitting up all my friends.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
But I think he would attest to this too. He got really good at the hand-drawn, handwritten font thing.
I know who you're talking about, Mr. Tyler Thornton.
And it led to a lot of really, really cool opportunities for him.
Yeah.
But when the trend ended, that being an expert in that thing only took him so far. And he's still doing great things now. I'm not saying he's not doing great things now, but just the expertise in that one direction only took him and brought him so many opportunities. Yeah,
that's interesting. That's a whole nother topic, and we'll have him on the show. He doesn't know it yet. I haven't actually talked to him yet, but we'll have him on the show. We'll talk. So awesome, Devan. Well, thank you so much for your time. There's so much more I want to drill you about, but in the interest of not spending an entire day on this, we'll let you go. So tell us, if you want to check out your work, what's your website right now?
Yeah, you can go to SALT. That's SALT, like salt and pepper. So saltagency.co. That's my website where you see some of my work and the goods.
Nice.
Of course, I'm on Dribbble, dribble.com/Devan Flaherty, and then Twitter and Instagram. And I'm sure there'll be links to all that stuff if you want to provide it or not. Check it out. So yeah.
Definitely. Well, thanks again, man. Hope everybody enjoyed it. And don't forget to leave your questions and comments below. And thanks for listening.